Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices in Courage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
Hi, this is KL Wells with Voices in Courage, and man, we have a great guest today. I am so excited and looking forward to this. Mary Beth O'Connor has a book out that I just finished, and man, it is a page turner. I just could not put it down, and now my wife has it and she can't put it down. So big story from, and the book's called From Junkie to Judge, which I love the title of that book. And so Mary Beth has been clean and sober for about 30 years and has lived a remarkable life in her addiction and beyond. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So if you would, kind of give us some peek into your journey without giving the book away completely. And what precipitated, you grew up in the 60s, 70s, and I'm going to throw it to you there.
Full title of the book is From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And I really did want to show that substance use disorder trauma connection. And so I start the book, and of course my story, with basically my mother was, she was an unwed mother in 1961, which was a big deal. And I didn't even live with her for the first 6 months of my life. I lived at the nunnery. And then she married my sister's dad, 6 years, and then 3 years with my great grandmother. But mostly she wasn't really focused on me. She wasn't that interested in what I was doing or what was going on. She was really just interested in having peace and quiet, which isn't always happens with kids. But and she could be violent. She would hit. But it got a lot worse when she married my stepfather when I was 9, and he was really violent with her. He was, physically and sexually abusive to me. And it was just that kind of household where you never knew what was going to happen. I mean, It was, you walked in the house, you could do the same thing 10 times and it was fine. And on the 11th time, it was like the worst thing anybody ever did. And at first when she married him, I actually tried to figure out what are the new rules, okay. So like he didn't just walk barefoot in the house, which, I'd always walk barefoot in the summer. So, okay, I can adjust, he wanted us to call my mother had to be mom. You couldn't say she. It was like weird things. But once I tried to adjust, at some point I realized, okay, but I can't control this because there's always a new rule, or the same thing gets a different reaction, or he just, he's in the mood that he's in and it's out of my control. I could do some techniques to reduce the violence, but I couldn't eliminate it. And so it was just a constant stress and strain. So for me, when I found my first drug, which was alcohol, and 60s and 70s, right? It was Boone's Farm strawberry hill wine.
That's what I started on.
That's what a lot of people started on. And so it really made me feel looser, like I could breathe, and I was giggling with my girlfriend, and I just felt happy, in a different way than I could ever remember. And that really captured my attention, oh, this makes me feel better. And so I was pursuing alcohol right away. I mean, I was making opportunities to drink. The drinking age was actually 18 at the time in New Jersey. So I was able to go to parties with older people or steal alcohol. But I was pursuing the first drug that I took, which was alcohol.
Yeah. And then speak a little bit more to the escalation and,
And so I turned, there was a lot of pot, now weed or cannabis right around at the time. And I did a lot of that. I had pills, we would steal them, or people would sell uppers and downers. And I did a lot of acid my sophomore year of high school. But when I was 16, I found what became my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine. And I was shooting meth at 17 years old. So within 6 months of first snorting it, I was shooting it. And I was in full bore addiction in high school. I was in really bad shape the last 6 months of high school. But I did make it to college and I did better, better. I have to say better for the first 3.5 years. I mostly used on the weekend, mostly alcohol, some cocaine, some pills. But I had a really life-threatening multi-assailant rape in college and then moved in with a violent boyfriend and I couldn't hang on. And I started using meth again in January of my senior year of college. And I used until I was 32. So it was a long haul from 12 to 32. It wasn't like it was a short problem. It was a long haul.
Right, right. And so could you just speak a little bit to the connection between trauma and use? Because I think this is an emerging understanding for people who love people that are dealing with substance abuse disorder.
It's not that everyone who has a trauma history picks up, or that everyone who picks up has a trauma history, but my odds of developing a substance use disorder were about 4 to 6 times the average because it was, especially because it was ongoing trauma. It wasn't a one-time event.
Right.
And then the other way to look at that is that about 75 to 80% of the people with a long-term substance use disorder have some kind of trauma history. So there's a really close connection. And that's why sometimes people ask me, what's the one thing we could do to reduce the rate of substance use disorder in America? Because we have the US has a high rate compared to the rest of the world. And my answer to that is mental health treatment for children, because there is such a strong connection between that childhood pain and eventually developing a problem with substances.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much information now related to this piece. I mean, I had trauma when I was growing up. My son had trauma when he was growing up, and we chose somewhat different paths, but all kind of grounded in that. I walked into my home never knowing what the hell was going to be happening too, and that hypervigilance of like surveying, and then realizing that no matter what you do, it doesn't really matter. It's still going to happen anyway. I think there are more people that go through this than we know of. And so the statistics are, I think, underestimating what's actually happening, certainly in America at this point. So
you're right. I mean, the people who don't develop a SUD may have it's going to show up in some other way, which can also be unhealthy, whether it's some other behavioral disorder or being, a perfectionist. Perfectionism can be a sign of trauma, or, not valuing yourself and letting other people sort of have the dominant position. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that it can show up. You're absolutely right. It doesn't just show up one way. And those other ways may not be as physically risky, but they're often interfering with having a happy life, and that's really the most important. And so that's why I say that early treatment. If we don't have affordable, readily accessible substance use treatment or mental health treatment, both for children and adults. And that's one of the big problems in America. It's somehow we want to ignore sort of some of the core reasons that it happens and not treat them. And then once you develop it, it's sort of like, well, you should figure out how to get better. Like, we're not going to put a lot of systems in place to help you. I mean, most of the country, there's long wait lists. There's not enough beds for substance use treatment, and for children, of course, there's the complication that the people who would have to ask for help are often the people who are causing the problem, right? And so that's an additional complication. So
exactly. And so there's so many tentacles off of this, and we're both in it in different ways. And what I would say is, the things that you talked about later in the book in terms of taking care of yourself and all of these things, this is the stuff I coach loved ones on. It's the same thing. It's just a different side of the coin. And how do you love someone when they're in the midst of substance abuse disorder and you feel somewhat powerless? And particularly if you have a child who's an adult, or a spouse, or, a sister, or, like with your sister. Anyway, this is full ranging. So what I want to ask about is, like really, 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 what was the turning point for you, Mary Beth?
First of all, that it was a process, right? So I think sometimes we put up this sort of artificial expectation that when people start treatment or are thinking about it, that they should be like 100% sure and 100% committed. And in my experience, that's not typical, and it wasn't typical for me. But what happened was sort of a combination of events. I was having physical problems because, meth is a toxic drug, and
Yeah.
and I had lost yet another job because I could never hold a job because I was using all the time. I had a degree from Berkeley, and my last job was word processing, and I could only do it for 9 months. And I was really just exhausted, sort of beyond the pale. I was depressed and helpless, and my partner was ready to throw me out. And so it was sort of all of those things together at 32, where I finally said, okay, well, what if I go to rehab? Let's try rehab. But I didn't go there actually thinking I could get sober. Like, sober was beyond my imagination. I thought, maybe I can figure out how to use less, because then there would be less chaos and less misery. And it's not that I wanted to keep using, it's just that stopping was beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
And so I went in, and it was, and I also will say I used 3 times in my first 5 months. I have 29 years, but I used 3 times in my first 5 months. And I don't even think of them as relapses. I thought of them as sort of like, figuring out how to stay sober. Like, it was just, sort of going through the process
Research.
of it. So it was, so just that, actually, as I say, if I could have used 3 times in 5 months regularly, I wouldn't have been in rehab. A lot better, it was a lot better, but it wasn't perfect. And that too is common. And so for the friends and family, it's important that they know sort of these things, that it's a process to get to a real solid commitment to abstinence. It's more typical that one day you're committed and the next day you're thinking, well, maybe I can drink later, or is this, was I really that bad? And it's a back and forth, and that is normal. It's often happens that way. And I know sometimes ambivalence can be scary when you're the loved one, and you're not hearing the sort of the certainty and the absolute commitment that you want, but that's a normal part of the process. And that's how it was for me. I had to sort of work my way toward believing that abstinence was possible for me, and then figuring out how to get it.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing for people who love people. I mean, I had to figure out that, when the first time Sam went into a rehab, it was coming from jail, and we were like thrilled. And then when he got kicked out 2 weeks later, we did this high and low thing for quite a while, following the trajectory of his journey with substance abuse, and then kind of stepped back from it and realized, okay, I can't follow his trajectory on this, and it's going to be a process. And so this last relapse, I'm actually pretty good, certainly compared to what I used to do with this. But I think the process piece of this is, most people don't get it. They don't see it. They haven't heard it. They're thinking, oh, rehab, he's going to come out, or she's going to come out 30 days later, and we're going to be back on track again. And that's just such a lie.
First of all, 30 days, treatment isn't 30 days because they've determined that that's the optimal time of treatment. Treatment is 30 days because historically that's what insurance would pay for, if you even had insurance, right? And so it should be about a longer term plan. Like, is there aftercare, or what's the plan when you get out, and all those kind of things? Because treatment's sort of like a jump start at best, and a time to get your brain a little clearer so you can sort of try to make commitment. But I also say that, when people have to, when they don't have perfect abstinence, and there are, recurrences, we call them now, right? Relapse or recurrence. It's not like they usually are going back to zero. I hate that. Well, you're starting over from zero. Typically, that's not true, especially if they got some time under their belt, because they did learn some things during the time that they were sober, and they often have a higher level of commitment, even if they aren't able to be perfect. And so part of what I encourage the families to look at is the long-term trajectory. Like, often what you'll see is the periods of sobriety might get longer and longer, and the
Mhm.
relapses periods might get shorter and shorter.
Mhm.
Sometimes people give up one drug and then another, like alcohol or opiates is the worst problem, but they'll keep doing cannabis for a while and maybe they'll give it up later. And so there's different ways of approaching it. And so I always I think it's helpful to look at the longer term arc.
Mhm.
Even when it's having its up and down, sometimes if you look at the bigger picture, you can still see an upward trajectory. It's just sort of going up
Right.
like this, you know?
Mhm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it takes a lot to be able to hold that perspective and that belief that they are on an upward trajectory to getting their lives back, so to speak.
And you say, I'm friends and family too, right? I mean, everybody I know with a substance use disorder, we are friends and family as well. I
Mhm.
lost my best friend to heroin 14 years into
Mhm.
my sobriety. And, you know, that
Mhm.
was heartbreaking to me. And
Mhm.
my sister didn't get sober on my schedule. I mean, I put her in my rehab a year later. She lasted 8 days. Okay. She
Mhm.
did some later, but it wasn't on my time frame. And I know
Right.
how frustrating and scary it can be. But you're
Mhm.
right. You can't get micro managing into it because the
Right.
person with the sud's going to have to be the one to drive the process. You can help. You can hopefully keep a loving connection. I mean, that's
Mhm.
really important. And the
Yeah.
data shows that people with that loving friend and family connection on average do better.
Mhm.
And I know it's hard to keep hands off. I understand, but it is really important to let them drive the process and make their choices. Sometimes what I see with family is that they think the person needs inpatient, but the person doesn't think they do, or
Mhm.
they think, well, they need to go to AA, but that person actually prefers lifering or women for sobriety, or she recovers,
Mhm.
and the family can sometimes want to control the decisions about the
Mhm.
type of treatment or what the treatment plan, professional and non-professional is. And that can be problematic too, because
Mhm.
autonomy of the person with the medical issue of substance use disorder is important, that they
Mhm.
get to make their own choices about how they're going to proceed.
Yeah, I would say that's such great wisdom to own. So that's where I am with it. Is this is Sam's journey, and I have always delivered the message that no matter what you do, no matter what happens here, you are always loved, and we're here for you in boundaried ways. But what I find is that a lot of parents in particular have a really challenging time with this. Somewhere along the way, they got the idea that they were supposed to fix it, or save them or keep them from suffering or all of that stuff. And it's really a paradigm shift of beliefs. At least has been my journey.
Valid fear, right? I mean, we're afraid that we're going to lose our loved one, that they're
Right.
not going to be able to find sobriety before they die, or have permanent, medical or other
Mhm.
consequences. It's scary, and
Mhm.
not being in control is scary.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is important, and I think you're right. I like to use the word boundary, support, because it
Mhm.
just because I'm saying keep the loving connection doesn't mean I think you should let yourself be verbally abused or
Right.
financially abused or any of those other things. You
Right.
do have to look where's the proper boundary for you to protect yourself appropriately and take care of
Mhm.
yourself. And the other thing I'll say is that there are actually more friends and family support groups now than there used to be. Just like
Mhm.
a lot of people only heard of AA for sobriety, and there are many other options, and tens of thousands of people use them every year.
Mhm.
But for families, Al-Anon is what most people know, and it's not a good fit for everyone. The way their
But it
philosophy,
wasn't
their
for me.
ideology can, yeah. And so
Mhm.
I mean, Lifering offers friends and family. Smart Recovery offers friends and family. Hazelden offers friends and family. There are multiple other groups. There are internet support groups,
Right.
that
Mhm.
offer friends and family. And so
Mhm.
I always encourage the friends and family to also look at the support group
Mhm.
options,
Mhm.
because they might find a group that fits better than Al-Anon for them, and that can be
Mhm.
helpful to be with a group that sort of shares your worldview or your
Mhm.
philosophical beliefs, or a
Mhm.
meeting format that you like. It can help you feel more connected to your
Mhm.
peers in the support group than if you're
Mhm.
just in the only one you ever heard of, but it's actually not the best fit.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, the research is that um, building a strong community that has your back in the midst of anything that is life challenging is one of the top 3 ways that you navigate and are able to handle it and thrive on the other side of it. And so, I kind of relatively early on set an intention that I wasn't going to live in the crisis of my son's disease. That because I've got a great life. I wanted to continue to thrive, even in the midst of him dealing with his disease. And that has been a journey in and of itself. But so I had to build some communities that actually believed I could thrive in the midst of that, because a lot of people don't. They're in the hole with their loved one, and they're in the crisis of it. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Great. I love that approach and that way of looking at it. Kudos to you. That's fabulous.
Thank you. So again, put in kind of an exclamation point on how important it is to build your tribe. That's going to hold you in the outcomes that you most want to create for yourself on this journey. And then the other thing that you just briefly touched on, which I think is really important also, is 2 things. One is the brain hijacking that takes place. And I think that's important for a lot of people to understand better. And then the other piece is, and what I loved about your story was you did it your way. And that final line in your book, because I kept thinking, oh, she's doing it her way. She's doing it her way. And then you actually said it. And I'm like, yes.
So for me, when I went into rehab, they actually told me that the 12-step way that's all there was. They swore that I had to accept a higher power. I don't believe in a higher power, that I had to turn my will and my life over. I was not going to do that. That I had to agree I was powerless, which I didn't. But they literally told me, if you don't follow the 12-step program, you will fail. I mean, they were vehement about it, adamant about it. And so this was a problem because it wasn't the right fit. But I actually at first believed them. And I went into rehab in 93. But I thought, well, these are the experts. I guess that's the only way, but it's not going to work. And so what I really decided to do was sort of keep my mind and ears open and listen for the ideas. And look, I shouldn't just say, listen, proactively look for the ideas that I could use and ignore everything else. So I did read all of the AA Big Book and all the NA texts, and I actively participated in rehab classes, and I pulled out the parts I thought would be useful. And I even sort of reframed some of the steps, like step 1 is powerless over my addiction. I didn't agree, but I thought about it and I said, well, I can agree. I am powerless to moderate. Like there's no moderating for me, And so I tried to do all of those things, but it was still scary to be challenging the orthodoxy, especially when I'm coming out of a 20-year addiction and know that my judgment is fuzzy, my thinking is fuzzy. It was really scary to be choosing to sort of bolt against what they were telling me. But when I got home, and by now it's January of 94, and I will emphasize to the younger viewers, there is no Google. Okay. So I went to the library to see if there were other peer support options. And it turns out there were. They just hadn't told me. And so I found Women for Sobriety. I found which still exists. I do events at their conferences for them. I found Rational Recovery, which exists a little, but mostly is now Smart Recovery. And I found Secular Organization for Sobriety, which exists a little, but today is LifeRing Secular Recovery, and I'm on the board for LifeRing. I'm also on the board for She Recovers, which is for recovery, not just from substance use, but trauma, other behavioral disorders, self-harm, everything together. So I did what you said. I never ended up following any one program. I continued to do how I had started. I went to meetings for all the groups. I read everything for all the groups, and I pulled out the ideas I thought would be useful. And today, LifeRing would call that building a personal recovery plan, or She Recovers would call it building a hybrid or a patchwork plan. But that terminology didn't exist at the time. I didn't know anyone else had done it. But that's what worked for me, was to really think about sort of, here are the techniques. I read everything as a suggestion. Here are the suggestions. Here are techniques. I heard somebody talk about how they handle a situation like this. That might help me. Let me remember that, sort of file it away for if I can use it later. And then I just used the parts that I thought would be helpful to me. And so that's all. I mean, it's 29 years later. So I think I did a good job.
Well, no question. And that was avant-garde at the time, and courageous like you said, scary, courageous. And you kept following, the way that I think about it is you just kind of had this nagging guidance that this was my path. And so you you stayed true to that knowing. And I talk quite a bit about the same thing in terms of not everybody's going to agree with how I've come at this. And that's not important that they do. How I have come at this, the beliefs that I have are just options to explore. And so take what you want to take from what I have to say or what I've written or, all these things, take the things that resonate and use them, and then look for other things that will support you in whatever part of this journey that you're on. So we're very much kindred spirits along those lines.
30% of the book is about recovery. And part of it is because I did it a somewhat unusual way. And I really wanted to explain how I did it. And also I use those same techniques to attack my trauma recovery. Right. But it's not that I think someone should read the book and copy me exactly. It was just to really show how I thought about it, different ways of approaching it, analytically, how did I tackle it? But so to sort of view it as an example that some or all may be useful to other people, but not that I expect them to copy me exactly. It's just like I'm on the board for Life Ring and She Recovers. But I will also tell people about Women for Sobriety and SMART and other options, because I don't care if they pick my programs. What I care about is that they know their options and find the place that fits them best, because that's going to increase their odds of success. And that's really all I care about.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're in this place now in your life where it really is all about service and giving back. And we talked a little bit about this before we got on with the viewers today. And so what I'd like you to talk about a little bit more is kind of this notion of the journey. I don't know enough about this relative to the book, but and your journey, but your own journey kind of with shame, because shame seems to capture a lot of people and keep them stuck.
Interesting, because I'll say one of the things I felt most ashamed about wasn't actually my drug use. I don't know that I always knew that was related to the trauma. It didn't help me get it under control, but I knew that those were connected. But one of the shame things for me was the promiscuity around the drug use. And and that's something that hung around. And I'll say also another event that really hung around with a sort of agonizing, shame might not be quite the right word, but second guessing, was a choice I made during that multi-assailant rape, where I chose not to try to get away because I didn't think I could. And that really stuck with me for a long time. Did it mean that I wasn't valuing my own survival? Did it mean that I hadn't tried? And when I wrote the book, those areas, I made another step in the recovery in those areas. I really started to see my younger self sexual choices as being, I had before, but even more related to the sexual efforts of my stepfather, related to, really just feeling my value was in that I was pretty and I could, get men to give me drugs for free and those kind of things. But also the thing with the rape, that I really started to trust more that the Mary Beth in that moment knew the nuances of that situation. And it wasn't like I just decided it off the cuff. I thought about this choice. It was an agonizing analysis and decision-making process. And I had to trust that at that moment, I was considering all the factors in a way that I'll never be able to again, because it was immediate at the time. And I must have made the right choice. I came out alive from it. And I trust her more than I had really trusted before. So those are some of the thoughts I have around that question. The little threads that sort of follow you and sort of undermine your confidence or belief in yourself, or choices and decisions that you made. When you look at them in the bigger picture, there's always a reason, right? They're always connected to other threads. And that's something that I made a new step forward in when I was writing the book.
Yeah, I wondered if my experience in writing has been very cathartic and clarifying on so many levels. And so I wondered if, that had been your experience. And I will say that when I read that part of the book, you do an exceptional job of giving us the way you were thinking about it, the window in a way that I thought two things. One is, you were brilliant in that moment, like so brilliant in that moment, in the things that you did to survive that assault. And then I thought that brilliance also was actually one of the gifts out of your childhood, because you knew the nuances in ways that most people would not.
Well, I did even at the time think that part of the reason I was able to handle it as well as I did was because I knew how to put my fear aside and focus on what can I do in the moment to reduce my risk or help me get out of the threat or reduce the threat. I was aware that I was just pulling up a skill set that I had from living with my stepfather, and that actually may have helped me.
Yeah, absolutely. What I also want to touch on is forgiveness. And I know, my journey in forgiving myself and then forgiving others as their roles in all of this, and forgiving Sam for things that he's done. So I'm curious about your journey in forgiveness.
My mother is the example because I had an ongoing connection with her. My stepfather, she divorced him when I went to college, and I didn't really have to talk to him again. But my mother had, some ongoing relationship. And when I got sober, what I saw happening was that it wasn't, our relationship difficulties were not about what had happened when I was a child. It was that she kept behaving in the same way. And so sometimes she was even violent with me. There was a really bad violent episode when I was 35 years old. And so that was noticeable. But even before that, she liked to drag me into the chaos. And so at first, I would respond back with emotion and yelling and, behaving the same way she was. And then I realized I don't do that. Like, that's not how I want to act. And so I had to sort of gradually learn how to interact with her to be civil, but not react from an emotional place. And to try to keep my words and my tone appropriate. It was definitely a process. I think first I learned how to not use the bad words, but then, my face and my body language still weren't good. But gradually I got better. Or really part of it was that I could do well at first under neutral circumstances, but with an emotional escalation, I wouldn't do so well. So it was really a learning curve to learn how to interact with her and keep a civil relationship, but not let her drag me into her chaos. And for me, I didn't really view it as forgiving her. I never thought about that way. And I certainly have never forgiven my stepfather. But what I did learn through therapy is I had to release the agony, I had to release the pain because that was hurting me. That was undermining my happiness. That was undermining my joy. That was undermining how I was approaching life in general. So I don't agree with that. You've got to forgive, but I do think you have to release the emotional side of it that's hurting you. And so that's how I looked at it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you because, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and which is just a brilliant read. It's on our resource list. And yes, we do hold the anger and all that goes with that sort of thing. I'm just so curious as to your tenacity in keeping a relationship with your mother, and you just kept, perfecting your skill sets in terms of staying true to having some relationship with her.
Part of it was that she had custody of my sister's children, my nieces and nephew, and we wanted access to them, and she would use being mad at me as a reason, to cut off access. I remember one time they were literally supposed to be on the plane to come visit us for a week. And I did something she didn't like. And she was saying she wasn't going to put them on the plane. And I hear 3 kids crying in the background. I want to get here. Yes, so I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't for the children being there, but the kids were there. And so I had to maintain a relationship with her. But then, the other side of it was when she was dying. I was there. Partly my brother was living with her, and he was the primary person, and I wanted to support him with, all the things that were going on at the end. But also, to be respectful of her. So I was with her in hospice for the last, week of her life. And when she was dying, and even before, people would say, you'll be surprised how much her death is going to impact you. And, it didn't. It wasn't that I was happy happy. I felt bad for her. She died at 72. That's young. There was a little bit of sadness that my mother was gone, but it wasn't like grief the way that you would normally grieve a close parent. This disconnection, that emotional separation had already happened. But I wanted to logistically, pragmatically do what I could to make sure she was comfortable at the end. Just, she is my mother. But that's sort of how I approached it. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar experience when my mom passed too. I mean, she had a heart attack and died like that. And I wasn't there, but I remember, getting the phone call, and the first thing I thought was, she's finally at peace. And I was really grateful for that. And I remember an aunt of mine asking me at the reception after the funeral, how are you doing? And I said, I'm great. And I know, in retrospect, I thought she must have thought I'd lost my mind, because nobody really knew what was going on. So, but I do remember being grateful that my mom was finally at peace.
Saw my mother in later years. I mean, she was the one who was making her life miserable. I mean, it wasn't like she was having fun, right? I mean, she was living in chaos. There was always financial chaos. Her life was always a mess, some new catastrophe, some new crisis. And I did have to put up appropriate boundaries, like financially, because my mother had a gambling problem and she had a shopping room, but she had my sister's children. And so if she actually needed money, if she was short on money because she had to support them, we would have given her that money. But I wasn't going to make up for her gambling losses. So it was a really a tough balance to figure out, when is the financial request legitimate, and I should, pay for the floor. Although I would never give her the money, I would pay the floor guy, right? But what is it really about her gambling? It was a hard balance in that way too. So it was still, there were still complications. But ultimately, I did my best to try to keep things on a neutral ground and to do what I thought was fair, given that she was taking care of my sister's children in that way.
Right. Yeah. And I love the thoughtfulness in that, Mary Beth.
Yeah. I mean, she did better with them. She didn't do great, but she did do better. And probably she and my stepfathers make things even worse. And so, but yeah, I mean, all these relationships are complicated. When you get sober, it's really a process of figuring out what relationships am I going to keep and what are they going to look like? Because even if you want to keep them, there's usually an adjustment. Even person isn't as harmful as, say, my mother. People are used to you behaving in a certain way, and now you're going to change your behavior. You're going to be more assertive or put your needs on the table when maybe before you didn't, or you're not going to engage in a certain type of conversation. And people have to adjust. And so it is part of the process of recovery to think about, who am I keeping in my life, and how do these interactions and these relationships need to change so that I can actually keep them in my life.
Yeah, it's complicated, as you said. And that's also been my journey on the other side of this too, is I had to kind of think through, okay, who's going to support me in thriving in the midst of this chaos? Who can I, call when Sam has a relapse and I need to talk to somebody, and they're not going to go down the rabbit hole of, how could he do this to you? Or, being super judgmental about his decision and all of that. I cut out or severely minimized the people who brought a lot of judgment to the table and had that notion that somehow he was doing this to me, which I was like, what? Yeah. So it is complicated, and being intentional about who you keep at what distance or who you let go of. Woo, that's a big step in maturing.
It is. And it's difficult at times, right? Because sometimes you have to let go of people that you actually care about, but the relationships are so dysfunctional that, and they won't get better, that you have to let them go. And so it can be a painful process. There's a loss, there's a grieving in part of that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of like where you stand today in looking back over this whole thing that you call your life, what's kind of the message that's most important for you in service right now to deliver to people?
One of them is definitely multiple paths to recovery. That I want people to know that there are a number of peer support options, and they have different philosophies, they have different meeting formats. But the studies show that basically they're all equally effective. And it's what's important is that people find the right fit. But also, you don't even have to pick one. I mean, what I say is, if they make you sign in blood an exclusive contract, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
be careful. So that's always an important message to increase awareness about multiple pathways. But also, I will say, I thought long and hard about the title to my book and using the word junkie, which I would never use for someone else. But I really wanted to tie myself to my shooting meth, because part of what I see, say on media or on television, are these television shows about people who are shooting meth, and they're presented as if their life is just they're so hopeless. Like, why bother helping them? Look at where they are. They're beyond the pale. They're beyond our understanding. They're beyond our sympathy. They're beyond our empathy. And I really wanted to own, what? I shot meth until I was 32 years old. And in sobriety, I became a judge. And so I wanted it to be sort of hopefully a stigma reducer, to maybe make people think twice about writing anybody off instead of offering them help and services. And to really also be encouraging to the friends and family that no matter where their loved one is in the process or how much destruction to their life, that doesn't mean it's hopeless. That doesn't mean they can't get well. That doesn't mean they can't have a happy future. So that's part of it. The destigmatizing part is part of it. And that's a large part of why I chose that Junkie to Judge title, was to try to help do that.
Yeah. Well, I loved it. And obviously it spoke to me. My son, has dealt with meth for quite a while now, and fentanyl. And so I had a client years ago, because we have a homeless mental health drug addiction problem in the area that I live in. And her take on it was, why don't they just let him die? And she had no idea what my journey had been when she made that statement. And I, quite frankly, was so shocked by the statement. It took me a while to kind of process that. People, that statement says people are throwaways. And so that's another reason why I love your book, is because you peel back the disease and get to the humanity that is going through the journey of this. And we're all a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter of someone. Someone has loved us along the way. And in our own humanity, that's one of the things that's really important to me, is we've got to drop this judgment that makes people throwaways.
Some of that is, that's critically important, but it's also, people act as if there is a system in America of easily accessible and affordable treatment, and there isn't. So there isn't. So for a lot of people, if you even try to get into a program, if you don't have insurance, there's no bed available. You have to get on a list, and maybe, you'll get a referral 3 months from now, or maybe never. And there are a lot of odd rules. Like, for example, traditionally in rehab, if you had a relapse, they would kick you out, which is insanity. And with no other medical condition would you throw somebody out because they didn't have perfect commitment to their treatment or perfect ability to maintain their treatment. It wouldn't happen with any other disorder or disease, but it happens with drug use disorder. And so there's a lot of problems in the system, and yet people act like, well, before, even if you thought, well, at some point I'm going to give up on the person, we're near with the systems in place where that should even be on the table, even if you eventually had that idea. Not that you should, but we need to have a better system so that people get the treatment they need. We need to have a better, more than just the inpatient, but when they get out, what are the aftercare options? The data shows that people have longer term support, like 12 to 18 months. It doesn't mean inpatient, but with, social worker or counselor, someone helping them guide, peer support groups, access to mental health meds, right? Because substance use and mental health conditions go hand in hand. I had PTSD and severe anxiety, and I didn't know it. I had to get treatment for that too. I had to do therapy and medication, and that actually took longer than my substance use disorder to get under control. But we don't have these systems in place, and yet we expect people to magically get better. On top of which, a lot of people are unhoused, which is a whole nother layer of problem, which creates a whole new trauma. I mean, I can't even imagine the trauma of being unhoused. It must be horrible. So yeah, and not we should never write people off, but on top of which, people have a misunderstanding of the supports and systems and care that are actually available to people, but they're struggling. It's not where we're not anywhere near where we need to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole other conversation. And there's a lot of great people that are working on that. At the same time, I think we're still kind of falling apart so we can fall together, in terms of just taking care of people and being human and compassionate. So,
The reason I did the trauma was because I think maybe people will be more compassionate if they understand really that there's usually underlying cause for this. Often it's trauma, which / mental health, because most people that struggle through trauma have either depression or anxiety or some other condition, as PTSD, as a result. So if people understood the reality of it, where it comes from, and also the misery of living it. So my mother, when I was sober and my sister wasn't, my mother would talk as if my sister was out having a good time. And I was like, no, she's not having fun.
Wow.
She's living a miserable, chaotic existence. No one would choose this. Like, look at all the options on the table. I think I'll be a drug addict. I mean, it's misery. It's not a happy time. And I think people underappreciate that too. They think we're out getting high. Well, those good time days were years or decades behind you by the time you become, by the time they're really getting into the severity, or the people are looking at them as something that's so far gone that we shouldn't even bother. So there's so many layers to it. And even the harm reduction side, right? People sort of, hesitate to try to keep people alive. Why give them Narcan or any of that? But the truth is that people, they deserve our care as human beings to keep them alive. Some of them, in fact, a higher percentage of people that access harm reduction will go into treatment. But even if they don't, they're people, and they deserve our respect, and they deserve for us to do with them what we can to reduce not only their odds of death, but their odds of having long-term health impacts. Plus, the other side of it is actually cheaper than having people go to the ER every other day and all the other things that go on. And so if the money was moved from the emergency crisis situation that happens now into better long-term robust treatment, it would actually save money. So if all you care about is your tax dollars, it works for you too.
Yes. And that, I mean, yes, the dollars and cents absolutely, like, unequivocally make sense. And we're stuck kind of in this grip of, this is how we've done it for so long, and this is how the money is made for all these people that are making money, and they're not letting go. I'm kind of curious. I'm not sure I'll see it in my lifetime in terms of the breakdown that I think needs to take place and the rebuild that I believe is absolutely necessary. And but I'm going to do my part, just like you're doing your part. So yeah. And so the other piece too is, I mean, just this conversation alone is dropping the walls of the stigma. I mean, and we have to have more conversations like this, the truth of what this is, and who we are in it, and all that we've talked about today. We've covered a lot of ground in a lot of different pockets of what this journey looks like, not just for the person who's dealing with the addiction or substance use disorder, but also the loved one side of the equation too. And we have to do, as a loved one, our work too. So I interviewed a CEO just recently, and his son has been dealing with substance abuse disorder. And his son said to him, when he asked him, what do you need from me? And he said, Dad, I just need you to do your work. And that resonates and rings in my ear as a truth.
That's true. I mean, and you're right, there are a lot of people stepping up to the plate to try to do everything that they can. And I like, that more of the friends and family are willing to be open about it. But also more of us with the substance use disorder, more people are going public because of the value of that, right? And but it is complicated. It is complicated, and there's so many. But there's so many different. It's sort of like when you're giving your money to a charity. There's so many good charities, and there's so many ways to attack it. We all have to sort of find our lane and pursue that, and hope that there's other people picking up other parts of other balls that also need to be moved forward. Because you can't fix everything. I can't fix everything. I've sort of created my focus, and you've created your focus, and there are other people, of course, doing really good work. But it's harder than it should be. In this country, these things are harder than they really should be.
Yeah, this takes a village on so many fronts. So yeah, so I want to just say how grateful, deeply grateful I am for you and the message that you bring and the work that you're doing, and your willingness to serve and be a voice for so many people.
Thank you. And like I said, I mean, I really tried to make my book useful. Like, 30% about recovery. There's checklists and guidelines. And I also, if anyone's have a Twitter feed, I try to make that useful. I know it's crazy, but I post information on my Twitter feed. Science and articles and new perspectives. It's crazy, I know, but I do that because I thought about, well, what can I add to the conversation? I mean, that's the goal, right? So I want to share information for people who might not have access to it otherwise. And I mean, I view the book as part of the advocacy, and I did try hard to think about how to make the book of value, how to make it be something that I hadn't seen exactly a book like that, and how to find a place where I can add to the conversation, or where I can provide tools or ideas that might be useful to other people.
Well, it is going on our resource list. As soon as we can get it on there, I am a huge fan. And it will be one of the books that I certainly recommend to the people that I work with and know. And so, thank you for doing it. And so tell people how they can get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you.
Well, I have a website, junkie2judge.com, and you can message me through there. Some of my essays that I've written are also there, and some other information. My Twitter is @MaryBethO_, but if you forget, just do Junkie2Judge. You can always find me. And then my book is on Amazon and all the usual sites, or your local bookstore can get it.
Fantastic. So again, thank you for being with us today and being the person that you are in the world today. We so need you.
Thanks for the kudos. And it's really been a fabulous conversation. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencouraged.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations, so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencouraged.com.